Hey folks, David Stewart here. The internet used to be an escape from real life, but now it's just more real life that you can't escape. What I want to talk a little bit about today are third spaces and virtual third spaces or digital third spaces, and why those matter in the context of the decline of social gaming like MMOs, why that stuff really matters. So recently on the show, I had a fellow author and friend, Brian Niemeyer, and we talked about the decline of malls and these sort of spaces from the 80s all the way to today, what caused them, what those experiences were like. It was part of what we call the retro stream. And he wrote a really good article on third spaces over on his website, which you can check out. And it got me thinking about how most of our third spaces today are actually digital or virtual. Now, if you don't know what a third space is, that is just a place of social meeting that is not work or home. It's a third place. All right, so that would be like churches, taverns, or bars, arcades. The mall is a third kind of place, as well as clubs, anywhere that you would meet with people either to do something or just to have social time with other people that's not work or home. So nowadays, most of our third places are actually virtual or digital. You can think of Facebook as a kind of digital third place where you meet and socialize with your friends, whether it's a Facebook group or it's just the site in general. Twitter group chats or Twitter in general would be a kind of digital third space. The original virtual third spaces were things like forums, where you would meet with like-minded people about a certain topic and essentially socialize with them by discussing that topic on the forum. But you also had things like early social media like MySpace might qualify as one of these virtual or digital third spaces. But the big one for me is online gaming. Social gaming, especially in the early 2000s. It was such an escape from real life to play something like EverQuest or World of Warcraft and to meet in it and interact with other people and have not just like a forum that's full of people writing words that you're interacting with, but places that you are with other people, even if it's a virtual representation of that. It's not exactly like the real thing, and it's not a replacement completely of the real thing, but in a lot of ways, it was a kind of release valve for a lot of the pressures that were mounting in the early 2000s, particularly for young men. And I think these have only increased over time, and we've lost a lot of these outlets for young men to have these sort of third spaces where they can be themselves. World of Warcraft and early Call of Duty and Xbox Live, the old joke that I'm only racist on Xbox Live. This is a function of being free from the highly restrictive and even oppressive nature of the social matrix of the early 2000s, especially for men that were in college. Being able to walk away from that to the equivalent of, the Lodge, which was what Xbox Live was, and say whatever you wanted to say, no matter how vile or silly or weird, things that were not socially acceptable to say and would actually cause you very significant consequences if you said them to the wrong people. That was an outlet for that. And World of Warcraft was that way too. It was a place where, because of your layer of anonymity, you could be yourself, but you were still attached to an identity. You had a character name or a screen name that was you, an avatar of yourself, if you will. And even with Call of Duty, maybe you're bullshitting in the lobby or something, but eventually you're in a map and there's other people moving around with you. So it's like you are in a virtual third space, even with something like Call of Duty. And the policing of speech on those platforms has made it no longer a third space and just an activity, and maybe even a more lonely activity. But where World of Warcraft comes in, I think the destruction of World of Warcraft is more significant than people realize when they understand the social context of how the game was when it launched. If you weren't around for that, you can get glimpses of it by playing vanilla, but you'll get a better taste of it by playing vanilla on a private server. That is much closer to how it was in 2004 up through about 2010, or whenever the dungeon queue system started to come into play. I believe that was in Wrath of the Lich King. So what it was in World of Warcraft is it wasn't just like a forum. There were forums and you had guild forums and stuff, but you were in a space with other people. Even though it was an avatar, like this guy's a dwarf and I'm an elf, And maybe we're nothing like each other. This guy's a hairy dwarf and I'm a female night elf. I played as a female night elf for a while, or, I'm a gnome or something like that. I'm a gnome with pink pigtails, right? This is not me, but there's an idea that like that person that you're hearing in Vent or TeamSpeak or whatever is that little person hopping around, and you're both in this cave experiencing something together. And that's where a lot of affection for other people comes from. It's from experiencing things together, right? If you want to develop love with another person, like if you're dating a girl, you go have mutual experiences, and that's actually how you develop emotional bonds. And this is may seem weird to people now that hop into a game and what they want is to get to the activity as quickly as possible, because the game is no longer an escape from an oppressive leftist real life. It's just more of that, but with an activity. So that may not make a lot of sense to modern people today, but back then, that was a really important draw to it. It was a place where you could meet another person and know them and hang out with them and be yourself, say silly jokes that would be forbidden now to be said or get you fired. You could just say what you wanted to because you were your screen name, you were your character, you weren't Joe Schmo from Columbus that works at the DMV, right? You were something else. I knew people who met their spouse playing World of Warcraft. I have friends lifelong friends that I've made playing World of Warcraft that have been in weddings and all kinds of stuff that I still talk to. It was really something very different, and that social connection kind of disintegrated. It went away after Wrath of the Lich King, and that's because the destruction of the game is more than just the content isn't as good as it was, or the story is not as good. These are the things that you do with the other people. It's really that you lost the ability and the drive and the whole system, the holistic system that allowed you to interact with people. It used to be you had to go to Ironforge, to a place that looked like a physical place, at least on your screen, and meet other people to trade, to form up groups to go do the main form of content, which was going to be group content, whether that was dungeons or raids or something like that, to meet people that eventually you might join a guild and be part of a club with those people. That's what a guild really was a club dedicated to playing the game. You did all that in these virtual spaces. And eventually what happened is, in the interest of speeding things up and being more convenient for people, they introduced the dungeon queue system, which is where you could queue up for a dungeon. It would throw you in a dungeon with 5 or 4 other random people, not even from your server. And then you would go do the dungeon, and that was kind of okay at the end of Wrath of the Lich King, because Wrath of the Lich King dungeons were really easy. Even heroic dungeons were easy in Wrath of the Lich King. You wanted to get them done as quickly as possible, get your badges, go spin them on gear so you could be ready for the real thing, which was the raid. That was the attitude everybody had towards the end of Wrath of the Lich King. The dungeons were just something that you did for rewards. It wasn't like a serious activity. It wasn't like back in vanilla where doing BRD might take you 8 hours or something, right? It wasn't this serious time commitment. Dungeons took like 30 or 40 minutes. So something that put you in a queue, you didn't have to fly out or walk out to the dungeon. It just would put you in the dungeon and then you could do it. That was really convenient for people. And people quickly found that was a really quick way to level up characters. So eventually, not only are you not having to go to a virtual space to interact with people, you are using an automated algorithm to skip all the content that would let you meet people and enjoy the game the way that we enjoyed it back in 2004, 2005, 2006, etc. You miss all of that really fun element of the game. And then the third space kind of disappears as well along with that. So you're no longer meeting with people. You're no longer having a mutual experience with people that you see regularly. The servers, everything starts to be cross-server. Cross-server PvP happened at the end of vanilla. And that was actually bad for this feeling that I'm talking about. It reduced the sense of community. Communities declined. Everything broke up. Guilds were destroyed by the transition from a 40-man raid, which required lots of people, to a 25-man raid. Every guild broke up with the Burning Crusade. That's just a thing that happened at the time. So slowly but surely, that third place feeling disintegrated. And then eventually they started enforcing a lot of rules about speech. So you could no longer even with your friends privately, just say some sort of off-color things. You could lose your account for that. You could get silenced or banned, not be able to interact with people. The idea of World of Warcraft being an escape from real life disappeared and became more of real life. There's also a censorship thing that happened too, where they started to erase old graphics that they considered sexist or something like that. And one of the things I can't help but feel with like the attack on Xbox Live and the attack on World of Warcraft and other MMOs, from the gaming journalists over the last 10 years, the attack on gaming in general is because it was predominantly a male space. It's an attack on males. And one of the things we see going really far back is that third spaces, which tended to be very sex segregated in the 20th century, came under attack because they were sex segregated. You have to let women into the golf club. You have to let girls into the Boy Scouts. On down the list until there are no male third spaces. All male third spaces, all lodges, they're just gone, right? The point was to eliminate men's ability to go away from their home and away from women and to have a space that was predominantly male. Now, the thing about World of Warcraft is that, yes, it's predominantly male, but there were plenty of women. I meant people met their spouse. I didn't just mean gay couples. I meant like heterosexual couples meet their spouse. There were plenty of girls that played World of Warcraft, and nobody ever like excluded them or cared whether they were going to play, but it was male dominated. It was like 90% males, and that just kind of goes with the flavor of the game. Most of the no-lifers were males. They weren't girls. It just didn't flow that way, right? And I played with tons of women, and they were great to play with. But we have to be honest, it was very much a male-dominated place and a male-dominated space. And I think that's why gaming in general has been under attack, is because it's just been something that appeals a lot to males. Males have been the ones who've played games going all the way back to the 90s. They've been just more interested in them than women. My wife plays some games, but she's not as interested in games as I am, or my son is. And I can even see that difference a little bit with my daughter. My daughter likes to play some games, but she's more interested in other things, right? And that's just, I don't know. It's just a difference between the sexes, and that's okay. But my point is that our third spaces physically started to come under attack and were disintegrated, those male third spaces. And shared third spaces are also important, like the pub or the arcade, where you can actually meet someone from the opposite sex in a structured kind of social environment where everybody feels safe. Those are also very important. But the male ones and the female ones were also important for people to, cultivate the same sex friendships and things that help our society to function. So as we lose our social bonds and our communities start to die, and we need more virtual spaces, at least as steam valves for a lot of young men. Keep in mind, in the early 2000s, people are very concerned about woke stuff now. It was like all that stuff was very present in the university systems in California, at least in the early 2000s, where you felt like you were in a hostile country if you were a young man in 2005 walking onto a university campus. And I saw it transform from like 2001 to 2006. It was like 2001, everything was cool. 2006, you're walking on eggshells. People were getting, in trouble for all kinds of things at that point in time. And this was a fairly conservative area and fairly conservative school, by the way, too. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that, these third spaces. I would love to hear your thoughts down below about virtual third spaces and the decline of our other kinds of third spaces in our society, whether it's pubs or it's the mall, right? The mall was a place where young people could actually meet and socialize in a place where everybody could feel safe, a mixed third place. And what's really replaced them? I don't think social media is a good replacement for this, because it's just more real life kind of penetrating you into your regular home life, right? It's not like a release. It's not a place to escape to. It's not going on a hunting trip. It's not going to the lodge. It's just something else. It's just more of the workspace kind of influencing you. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts about it and what you think about that. To me, that's the big problem with the decline of social gaming, is that we didn't realize that it was a virtual third space that we needed to meet and congregate and to socialize and to know each other and to make friendships. And as a release valve where we could just be ourselves in a place without having to worry about all the consequences that could come from every word we might say. And it's gone, it sort of disappeared. It's disappeared, not sort of. It just disappeared. It slowly crumbled away until it was gone, and then we didn't realize why we liked it so much until we stop and think about it. Okay, so that's a big mistake I think people make with a lot of stuff. Like, is the new Call of Duty maps good? It's like, no, it's really that we miss being able to just be awful on Xbox Live. Or it's the new World of Warcraft raid any good? Well, if you really care about raids, I guess you care about that, but mostly you're not going to make any friends in World of Warcraft anymore, and that's the big thing that changed. So have a good one, guys, and I'll see you next time. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you are checking out my Substack, because I will have an article on this. Just basically same information from a different direction, but it feels different talking to the camera. Like, this is a kind of virtual third space. It's a little more social for me to just turn on the camera and talk about these things versus typing them out for someone else to read later. You know what I mean? So I'll see you all next time. Have a great one.